Good evening. Good evening. Welcome to this uh, November 9th edition of Smart Church Amplified. I see that we are already coming in and saying hello, and I want to be sure to greet not just the people who are in the chat, but everybody that's connected to us tonight. We appreciate your presence with us, your being a part of this conversation where we intentionally engage in a manner of teaching one another. Nobody's experience and or expressions are unimportant or any less than others. I consider myself here simply to facilitate a conversation, and that most of the teaching come from the masses, from the body of us. And so I'd encourage you, one, if you have something to add to our conversation to help to inspire us and then uplift us, to educate us, then please, as much as you can, join us in the chat box, in the conversation. If you don't, that's cool too, because like I said, we're all here to learn from one another. I'm just here moving the conversation along. As I've tried to say, we thank God for all of you who will post scriptures, for those of you who will make the notes for us, put the notes in the chat box for us. When there are questions, we stop. We appreciate the chance to answer questions as much as we possibly can. We just consider this our time together, the middle of the week, right? We pause and say, let's think and talk about God together. Think and talk about certain passages of scripture, and to elevate, right, and to amplify, expand that conversation to beyond merely parsing verbs and trying to interpret nearly 2,000-year-old scripture, to talk about God and what we know about God. And it has thus far been a very beneficial experience, right? Enlightening experience. And we don't see any reason why it should stop tonight. We always want to pause and thank God and give a shout out to the rebroadcast crowd, those sisters and brothers who catch us at a later time that benefits their schedule. We know you making a special effort. And so we thank God for you. If you are new to this conversation, this is your first time, hang in there with us. Don't go anywhere. I promise you, you're in the right spot. And when you see how things begin to roll and experience this for yourself, I'm telling you, you are going to be blessed by what we do here. This afternoon, we started a conversation still talking about that theme of power. And tonight's conversation will be based on those scriptures. We're talking about the power of solidarity, the theme, the power of solidarity. And the scripture is Hebrews chapter 10, 23 through 25. Hebrews chapter 10, 23 through 25. And we're talking about the power of solidarity, being together, coming together, cohesive, if you will. Hebrews chapter 10, verses 23 through 25. And I'm reading from the New International Version. Let us hold unswervingly to the hope we profess, for he who promised is faithful. And let us consider how we may spur one another on towards love and good deeds, not giving up meeting together as some are in the habit of doing, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day approaching. And in my New International Version, the word day is capitalized. And so that must mean that it is a day that other people recognize, a day that is special, if you will. And of course, as believers, and some of us mature believers, we know the day we're talking about when we know that Christ will return. We're believed We believe we have been taught that Christ will return to gather his people together. That's why that's capitalized. So our conversation, and I am so looking forward to hearing and seeing what you have to say, us communicating with one another. Our conversation is about the power of solidarity. And the best way I can describe, or we can describe this entire letter, the book. What is this book about? The book of Hebrews. We already know, we've discussed every time we talk about the book of Hebrews, we already know Paul did not necessarily write this book. We already know that. We already know about the hall, that chapter that includes what we call the hall of faith. Chapter 11 that lists all of the people, right? That whose lives demonstrated their great faith in God. We understand, right? The running of the race, laying aside the weight that so easily besets us. Chapter 12. Listen to what theologian James Earl Massey, how he described the book of Hebrews. He says, Hebrews is a confessional writing sent to strengthen faith, inform the will, and renew the hope of the impatient, questioning believers who needed to continue. And then he quotes 12:2, looking to Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of our faith, who endured the cross, disregarding its shame, and has taken his seat at the right hand of the throne of God. What caught my attention is the description of the recipients of the letter: impatient, questioning believers who need to continue. Hear that again. Impatient, questioning believers. Now, you don't have to tell us, but I wonder if we have ever fallen under such a description. Now, notice it is said about these people that they are believers. They have heard the gospel, as we call it, the gospel, the lynching, the burial, and the resurrection of our Nubian Redeemer. They have heard and embraced and taken to heart and believe that is the way that they should view the world, through the lens of our resurrected Christ. But life circumstances have developed some other dispositions in them. They believe, but they also are impatient. How long, Lord? And they are questioning. Questioning what? Perhaps they are questioning themselves. Should I have given up everything that I knew about life and living to follow this way that they call Christianity, discipleship? Maybe they are questioning God. God, don't you see what we are dealing with? Or perhaps they're questioning the institution of synagogue, right? Because they're still, the church, right? They're still going to synagogue and hearing the scripture and applying it to their faith in Jesus. Why don't these people just live like they're supposed to live? Why is it I hear people saying one thing and they're doing something? I don't have time for this place, these people, which leads to the next one. Maybe they're questioning one another, right? Because you know, old sister so-and-so or brother so-and-so, impatient and questioning. In transparency, I'm ashamed to say that even with my believing God self, on my way to heaven self, trusting God self, I too, even recently, but more times than then I care to mention, have found myself in the impatient crowd. I wish that God would hurry up, right? I don't know why this is taking so long. Why am I watching the people around me seemingly going through, right, on flower beds of ease, jumping from mountaintop to mountaintop, and here it appears that the road I'm traveling seems always uphill and so hard for me to go. I too have found myself questioning myself and questioning God. What in the world is God? What are you thinking about? How could you leave me in this kind of a condition? Errol, I can't believe you could be so stupid. That's why this letter of encouragement, of faith, right, of trying to inspire and fuel hope, that's why this letter is written. And I dare say that perhaps you are like me. And there are Wednesdays when I come into this setting, not just to lead the conversation, but to be inspired by what you have to say, right? To be uplifted by what you have to say. There are times when I come here on Sundays and I sit in my car, turn it off and sit there. And but for the fact that Brother Stewart comes to the door on Zion Street, I don't know if I would get out. But more times than not, I feel better once I have spent my time among the saints and among any. Am I the only one? I'm checking the chat to look to see if anybody is going to be transparent enough to say me too, right? That's me too. And it's not just about church, right? I'm going through life saying, man, not today. That's why this letter is written. And I would suggest again, perhaps that's the reason why God gave us this moment, this time in the middle of the week, that we can pause and have these conversations. So check it. By the time we get to verse 10, and of course 10 leads to 11 and 12, the very kind, I wouldn't say the heart of as in middle, but the heart of like the point where, okay, we really gonna drive home this thing about being faithful, about holding on to faith, believing God, keep your confidence, and maintain your hope, and look to Christ, right? Because this entire book is about Christ. And look to Christ if you want to know how to overcome stress, how to overcome disappointment, frustration, anxiety. The 10, 11, and 12 the 10th, 11, and 12th chapters really drive it home, right? This is where we find the encouragement. So by the time we get to chapter 10 and we start dealing with our 3 verses that are a part of a much larger paragraph, not much, but a larger paragraph, actually verses 19 through 25, what we find is this is kind of a core, if you will, of these notions of faith, hope, solidarity with one another. Yes. Nancy Lamel says on Facebook, we need to be reminded of the goodness of God. And she, of course, personally says she knows that she does. Yeah, we need to be reminded of the goodness of God. Even when we think, okay, I'm not feeling this worship stuff, being around people, all of that. Sometimes it's our personal prayers and the humming of the hymns, or the songs, or spending time alone with God, right? That lifts us, and as Sister Lamel says, reminds us of the goodness of God. So when we get to verse 23, you'll notice that these words are meant to the individuals who are folded into the community. I say it like that on purpose because quite often it is community, the body of the institution that needs to be lifted up, as much as, picking out individuals that, and, truth is, you can always find somebody going through something when you get a group of people together, right? And so it's about lifting the people in the institution, the community, that we see happening here. Our brother, Pastor Raby on YouTube says, what helps me is Hebrews 14:2. The gospel was preached unto them as well as unto us, but didn't profit them because it was not mixed with faith. Excellent. You ought to write that one down. Keep that one in your spiritual notes, if you will. Almost said Rolodex, but our young old heads may not even know what that is. Your spiritual notes section, Hebrews chapter 14, verse 2. Excellent. About mixing, hearing the gospel with faith in the one of the gospel. Thank you. Thank you, sir. So 23 gives us this idea of hope, holding on. And I mentioned, and I promised at noon that I would bring the book out. I mentioned the one that I always turn to on these notions of hope. And you've heard me mention this guy over the years. He's a German theologian. I'm trying to hold the book straight. I hope you can see it. Get the glare out. His name is Jürgen Moltmann, who developed this theory. Pastor Raby's correcting himself. That's Hebrews 4:2. Hebrews 4:2. Thank you, sir. Not 14, Hebrews 4:2. So yeah, this is Jürgen Moltmann, theology of hope. I've been turning to this for years to get this understanding of hope. And I want to walk it through for a second, for a moment, to get us acclimated to this notion of hope. When Moltmann talks about hope, he is really talking about a term we know, a term called eschatology. You remember that one? eschatology. Eschatology, eschatology. And that's a term that speaks of the end. Most of the time it is applied to the book of Daniel and the book of Revelation, speaks of end times. So this text that we brought up, Moltmann's text, when he talks about hope, he doesn't just mean in our immediacy or in our immediate future, but a lot of what he refers to in that text is the end. Our hope is that, in our phrasing, in the end, we win. No matter what we are dealing with now, no matter what we are going through, when God rolls up time, when Christ comes back, Moltmann says our hope is tied to, at that moment, we know that God will fulfill, right, his promises to us, that, again, in my little simple terms, in the end, we win. But then he kind of rolls it back for us such that we can put it in our earthly sphere, if you will, in our living now, right? Because it's good to know that at the end of time, that it's all going to work out for us. All of us want that. But it is also encouraging, right, and inspiring for us to know that we can keep our hope, our faith, our confidence in God, because God will work things out for us while we are here on earth. And so, yes, my hope, while I am going through, while I am dealing with, my hope says at the end of this situation, right, one, that I'm going to make it through, and then two, in the end, it is going to be better for me. Sister Geraldine Gatlin on YouTube says, when we share our faith, we strengthen ourselves in the Lord. It will also motivate one another. Speak, sister. I need to read that for you again. When we share our faith, we strengthen ourselves in the Lord. It will also motivate each other. Good evening, brother and sister Gambler. Brother Stewart saying one of the messages of Hebrews is that Jesus is better. Christianity is superior. Christ is supreme and completely sufficient for our salvation. Christ is completely sufficient for our salvation. Yes, yes. Please keep the conversation going. So this notion of hope, right? Again, is that if we tie in the salvation piece, that we are saved for the end time, but God is so much God in our lives, and our faith is so in Him, brings about such holistic salvation that yes, in the end, it's going to be all right. But while we are here, God is still working all things together for our good. So yeah, I'm going to make it through this. I know that. And that's what gives me the drive. That's what fuels and inspires me, us, to keep pushing no matter what we're dealing with, to keep going no matter what we're dealing with, because we know that God will bring us through it, give us what we need to make it through. Hold on to hope is what the writer, she or he, says to the believers, with this notion of, we can count on God. That's extremely important to remember, to recognize that God is reliable. If you call Him, He'll answer, is what our elders taught us. That God will never be lacking in supplying our needs, right? No good thing will He withhold from us, from those who believe and who love God. That God is reliable to keep His word in our lives, that God is an excellent, not just a good, but an excellent patron in our lives, in watching over us, that God protects us. We can rely on God, right? That nothing will sneak up on Him. It may sneak up on us, and we'll say, I never saw it coming. God never says that, because God is always at work in our past, our present, our future, all at the same time. And so one of the things that connects us to our God is the reliability of God, right? That we can count on Him. And as much as possible, we try to live in a manner, in a way that says that God can count on us, right? God can count on us to go through without giving up the faith. God can count on us to not just receive blessing, but to be a blessing. That God can count on us to be faithful in our deportments, is what we used to say every month before we came together for the Lord's Supper. That means to remain steadfast, to remain unmovable, right? As it relates to our relationship with God and how we demonstrate God to other people. And so just as we say that God is faithful to us, then it is up to us to discipline ourselves enough to be as faithful to God as we possibly can be. And then that will lead us to faithfulness to one another, which is what we will talk about later, right? That will lead us to be able to count on one another. Thirdly, when we get to the next verse, it's about looking out for, watching over one another. Now, check it. This is not about being nosy. This is not about being nosy. Sister Charlene Anthony says, it's a good thing for us to recognize our state of being and then encourage oneself. Remember, it's almost impossible to encourage others if we're feeling down or uninterested. Self-help equals hope. Put that on the t-shirt. Self-help equals hope. Thank you, sister. Thank you for teaching us. So when the text talks about let's look out for one another, this is not about being nosy and trying to always know what's going on in someone's life or trying to control what's happening in someone's life. It makes me think about this kind of spoken admonition that many of us got, those of us who had siblings. And sometimes it was unspoken, it was just expected when we had siblings and moving around in life, especially when we were younger. There was this understanding, there was this thing to look out for your sister or look out for your brother, especially when parents were not around. Anybody remember that? Especially in going out to public spaces when parents were not around, or maybe we were left at home, especially when we were dealing with younger sisters and brothers. That's when we were admonished, told, right, commanded in many instances to look out for your sister or brother, right, or plural, sisters and brothers, right? That's what God says to us. And as much as sometimes we don't want to hear it and don't want to be responsible, God says to us, look out for your sister or brother. Except it's a little more serious. It's a little more serious as it relates to our discipleship, our walk with one another, because it also requires helping our sisters and brothers to lift up the heavy loads that sometimes life will bring upon all of us, right? Don't matter how saved you are, how much scripture you know, even how much God has used you to minister to other people. And I know that we have all been there when, we are already carrying a load, if you will, if we can use that kind of example, analogy, and God will send somebody for us to minister to. And I don't know how it works in your life, but I have those conversations with God that say, you have got to be kidding me. You see, I'm struggling through this situation myself, and you're going to send somebody for me to try to help. But yes, says that we lift up, bear one another's burdens. It's a little more complicated and serious, if you will, as it relates to our discipleship, because sometimes we do have to help one another to carry the load. I'm a fan of P.J. Morton. I don't know if you guys ever listen to P.J. Morton, Bishop Paul Morton's son, a phenomenal musician and singer and songwriter and so forth. In his latest project, which is maybe a year old now, maybe a little older than that. Sometimes I'm slow on my music, but he has a song on, I think the project is called Watch the Sun, and the song is called Lit Too Heavy. Lit Too Heavy, that's our dialect. And the song is basically about, it's heavy right now and I need somebody to help me. Man, and I thought about that thing. And there are times when God, puts us in those types positions with our strong selves and faithful selves, and everybody can always count on us selves, right? We carry the load for other people, but every now and then, God will put us in the spot where it's a little too heavy and we need help. And that's where we ought to be there for one another. Some teaching happening, Sister Daisy Johnson on YouTube saying we have to love one another as Jesus Christ loves us. Man, it's, right. It's not so mind blowing. And, you don't have to have no complicated theoretical formulas. Christ loved us, so we ought to love one another. And we're going to talk about that. Thank you for bringing it there. Brother Donald Lewis on Facebook said the old saying, he will never put more on you than you can handle. Yeah, it applies, right? God watches over us, and so he expects us to watch over one another. It is a little more complicated, as it relates to our discipleship, just a little more serious, right? There's some deeper obligation there. One, remember, carry one another's burdens. I hope we will remember that one. Is the second one, restore one another. And this is leading to this conversation about solidarity. Restore one another. I gave these scriptures at noon, but let's talk about them just for a minute. James 5:19 through 20. If you were there at noon, you already have this in your notes, but if not, hey, this is a good time. Write it down so that you can go back and read and study and devote some time and energy to it. James 5, James, the book of James, chapter 5, 19 through 20. My brothers and sisters, if one of you should wander from the truth and someone should bring that person back, remember this: whoever turns a sinner from the error of their way will save them from death and cover over a multitude of sins. Are you checking that? You know, when a brother, sister, or brother is drifting away from our center, you know, moving us away from our standard and so forth, right? It's up to us to say, hey, I want to talk to you in love, right? I want to help you. I want us to come together on this, right? That what you're doing, that ain't cool. That's not how we get down. You know better. Depending on the level of respect in the relationship depends upon how tender the words are, or the severity, because sometimes we have to be a little tough with people. And some people have to be a little tough with us to get our attention, right? So it is about this notion of restorations. Check out Galatians 6, 1 and 2. Galatians 6, 1 and 2. Brothers and sisters, if someone is caught in a sin, you who live by the Spirit should restore that person gently. But watch yourselves, or you also may be tempted. Carry each other's burdens. That's what we just talked about. Carry each other's burdens, and in this way, you will fulfill the law of Christ, right? Restore persons back into community. And sometimes the restoration has to start with restoring them back to themselves, back to their center, back to the relationship with God, in the manner that you are led to do so, in the manner that you know that they will hear you, in the manner that God will ultimately lead you or lead us. Restore. We don't throw people away, right? We don't push people away for good. And that's in our culture, right? Before somebody showed up with a codified religion, a religion in a book, there were no jails in our culture. There was, until you can get your mind right, you get away from here. You go out there by yourself. We don't want you around us but now if you can get yourself together, then you are restored back to the village, back to the community, back to the family. That's in our culture. That's in our DNA, right? Restoring one another. We don't just, like we're balling somebody up and throwing them away for good. Sister Daisy Johnson says, yes, we are all our brothers' keepers, our sisters and brothers' keepers. That's exactly right. Who Adam and Eve's sons? I forget their names. It's slipping me. Am I my brother's keeper? Yes, you are. Yeah, you're supposed to be watching your brother, your sister. Thank you, Sister Johnson. Thank you. So, yeah, what a deep expression of love, right? When we can genuinely pay attention enough to help one another with thoughts or words, or like, you really should get some rest, or thoughts or words like, you're not acting like yourself today. What is that old that commercial? Here, eat a Snicker. No, I'm joking. But you're not yourself today. What's up? One of the traits or habits that I'm trying to pick up as I'm dealing with people. How can I help you? Can I do something for you? You need me to do anything for you today? And it's you know, it's no great thing. It's not a, it's really how I used to talk to my mother. Uh, when, you know, when I would talk to her, I, one of the things I would always ask is there anything you need me to do for you, especially at the end of the day? I'm on my way in. You need me to do anything before I go home? Uh, you know, that's an expression of love when we're looking out for one another like that. Or, you know, and here's the one where they always get me, zing me. Did you go to the doctor? Or did you take something for that? Right? Because, you know, we try to be men and we're going to tough it out and all of that kind of stuff. Sometimes, you know, we need somebody to love us enough. Was it Tom Joyner used to have that take your loved one to the doctor day? So, I'm just trying to give examples of, you know, what is one of the maybe one of the ultimates. Can I pray for you? Right? How powerful is that when someone says, I'd like to pray for you right now. And God will send that person, man, God will send that person at seemingly just the right time. Cain and Abel, thank you. Thank you, Pastor. Cain and Abel, yeah. Um, uh, God bless her soul. I remember that Sister Helen Collins. I want to say Stepter. Helen Collins. Oh man, on many occasions, she would just seemingly show up right on time with you know, let me pray for you and hold me by my hands. And you know, that's a sincere expression of love. And I hope that we all have that person or persons in our lives that will genuinely talk to God about us and genuinely talk to God about us in our presence, right? And in touching and agreeing with us. So look out for one another. I'm not trying to be nosy, but our Father wants us to genuinely care for one another and look out for one another. Part of my assignment, as the shepherd or the under shepherd, however you care to express it, is to look out for you. Um, and you know, I think that God gives we in this day and age we don't talk about callings, we talk about assignments. So however you want to phrase it, and sometimes it's a little more difficult than others because and you already know because we've been together enough, we talked enough, and you know that I have been the same from day one, right? It's still the same. Part of what I do is to look out for us, to hopefully to call us out of a world view that is so dominated by Eurocentrism, you know, that is so dominated by this myth of white supremacy. That stuff is all around us, right? And sometimes we can recognize it even in all of us, right, in ourselves, that we pull ourselves up away from our roots, what mama and them taught us, and how we've been taught to deal in the world and by the elders and so forth. We pull up all those roots in order to try to plant ourselves in a position that will make us acceptable to the dominant culture or make us acceptable to people around us, right? And think we're going to be fruitful, and we are not fruitful at all. And God sends, part of what I do is to call us back to ourselves, right? Call us back to what the elders taught us, what mama and them and daddy and them taught us, what we learned from our Sunday school teacher, right? That seemed like they were so smart when we were children. And those, you know, our real, call us back to our real roots. Now I'm going to bring up something now, and I want you to go with me. It might be a little difficult to swallow, but part of what I've been trying to do and what I honestly believe that God has sent me to do, especially in this space, is when we get to holiday time, holidays, to go back and to teach origins and to teach where they come from, so that we recognize a lot of what has been attached to our religion has no religious basis at all. And so I try to insert our faith and our culture in so that we again won't uproot ourselves in order to be a part of something that is not of us and not of God, especially not of God. So I don't teach, right, like the origins of Thanksgiving or the origins of Halloween and All Saints Day or the origins of Christmas to say, "Oh, look how smart I am," or to be that one saying, "You going to hell because you celebrating these." No, because I don't think that's God's way, what God's mode of operation. That's not it. But when we know better, we do better, right? Because we all grew up with that little white baby in a manger, right? And that's so far from the truth. It's not even biblical, right? It's not biblically right. It's not historically correct. It's not biblically correct. And so we want to operate and know the truth of God, but we also want to be able to bring in our culture, who we are, according to the truth, right? And so that's why I try to introduce us. No, not introduce, reintroduce, and to push us forward into an encouraging, at least a recognition of Kwanzaa, even if we don't practice among ourselves or as a faith community, or Umoja Karamu, the alternative to Thanksgiving that is culturally based on who we are. Because, I mean, we're going into Thanksgiving season, right? And we're celebrating because the pilgrims supposedly came up with some Thanksgiving, and then one of the presidents, I don't remember who, made it a national holiday, right? But truth of the matter is, the pilgrims came here and brought disease, guns, germs, and steel, right, to the indigenous people who were here, stole their ways to survive, stole their land, raped their women, all kinds of craziness. Why? That's no Thanksgiving. That's nothing to give thanks about. If you think about it, right? Ask our indigenous sisters and brothers what they think about Thanksgiving and Columbus Day and so forth. So let's move on. The text in verse 24, right, encourages us to stimulate one another, to inspire one another, to incite one another to both love, that's loyalty, and to good works. And one of the things that we talked about and people talk so powerfully about today was this notion of, it's not so much about what we say, but people will watch us. And if we are really living our professions and our hope and our faith, our confidence in God, then that will stimulate and inspire and incite others to love and to good works, right? It may not be the sermons that we speak with our mouths, might be the sermons that they see in how we treat one another. That's that song we used to sing, and sing, and they will know that we are Christians by our love. So it is about stimulating one another, stimulating and inciting the good in one another, right? Provoking the good in one another, and not giving people doubt or reasons to make excuses for our behavior or our language, right? We want to give people reasons to model us, to do what I do. Isn't that what Paul talked about? Paul said, just follow Christ like I follow Christ. Do what I do. Follow my model. I'm setting the pattern. And when we can say that, and especially knowing that God hears us, right? That when we can say that, God, I tried to be the best model I could, or I tried to lay out the best pattern I could, I think that's what pleases God. Sister Howard says on Facebook, "It's not what we say, it's how we act." There it is. Sister Charlene Anthony say, "Every day is a day of Thanksgiving." I know that's right. And again, part of our culture, right? God, I thank you for waking me up this morning. I thank you for the clothes on my back. I thank you that my last night's slumber was not my last, right? And the cooling board prayers and all of that. That's right. That's we are thankful all day, every day, right? Dr. Domain talks about, I put my left foot in my left shoe and my right foot in my right shoe, and I didn't need anybody's help to do it. Man, that's, thankful living lives of gratitude. Thank you, sis, for reminding us of such. Um, so, yeah, so we incite people, provoke people, inspire people in the way that we live, right? Then this is what we've been trying to get, this idea in verse 25, not forsaking the assembling of ourselves together, that we should always assemble. But that's not just about going to church. And that's historically correct. That's just not me expanding scripture. That's historically correct when you consider that the synagogue was not just a place to have church, but to actually gather, to have community. And so that's where we are when we talk about assembling, coming together, living in solidarity, right? That's where we are. Don't forsake coming together in real community. And let's face it, that's where the contemporary church is lacking, right? We come together, sit on the pew. We might speak, we might not speak to one another. We'll clap and sing and the same songs and say amen to the right places in the sermon, so forth and so on. But in many instances, we scatter. And every now and then we'll call and check on somebody, and some might have a relationship with this one or that one. But as far as real community, we struggle. We struggle, and there's a lot of work to do in that area. And so we are called to not forsake, I'm going to use my word, solidarity, to never forsake solidarity. And so this means intentionally creating time and space for us to be together. This is about family, right? This is about relationship. And of course, this is about community. This is about our faith community to intentionally create time and space for us to coalesce, for us to be together. For the recipients of this letter, it was about, coming together, living together, communing together, so that they can create a worldview together, that they would not be confined by the past Jewish ways of knowing. You right? Because the temple or the synagogue was saying, y'all not Jews. You all are not Jews because you won't follow the precepts of looking for the Messiah. You say the Messiah has already come. But then also not being crushed by the Roman Empire, right? The oppressive Roman Empire. Come together, right? You need one another for encouragement, for protection, because Rome was doing its thing, and then they were having issues with the synagogue, with the temple, if you will, and so that's why the writer was saying there has to be solidarity among yourselves. I would suggest the same thing, that we have to create space. We have to create time for us to be together, and not just for the hour of worship, right? So that we can create real relationships, so that we can create real integrity. And I'm going to talk about that in a second. As it relates to families, we have the holiday season coming up, right? And instead of just following what we know and what we've been taught about the European ways and the European Thanksgiving and the European Christmas. Right? Why not create some traditions of your own that's perhaps unique to your family? Maybe it is remembering the ancestors, or having a session of rather than let just Thanksgiving, let's stuff ourselves with turkey and dressing and then watch football and fall asleep and start looking toward Black Friday. Why not create some traditions where I don't know, where we remember those who walked this way before us, or somebody who is knowledgeable talks about in the family, hey, this is where our family comes from, or having the younger ones to make some kind of cultural presentation that is unique to your family. It should be more than about, and we have to do this intentionally, because it's not going to just happen, right? Because if we don't watch it, those teenagers, those young adults, they're gonna run in, fill that plate up, stuff themselves, and they're gone. They're going to do their thing. Let's pause. We're a family, right? Or we are community, whatever it is. Let's pause. Um, so the idea is harmony. That's a key word. Harmony. We brought up our indigenous brothers and sisters, the Lakota or the Sioux people have a construct or a way of life that they call Eloheh. 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 And it means that everything is in harmony. Incidentally, one of the books that I use to inform myself, since this is Thanksgiving season, this is a great one you ought to get on yourself. Indigenous Theology and the Western World View. Indigenous Theology and the Western World View. This is a great one you should read. And believe me, you can never read too much, whether you agree with what you're reading or whether you don't agree. You can never read too much. Indigenous Theology and Western Worldview. And so this guy, Randy Woodley, who is Lakota, and this book I think was written in 2021 or 2022, talks about this worldview or this construct of his people, that everything is in harmony, right? And so when they say that, it means that the ground is producing what it should. There is no war, and the people are generously joyous, right? The ground is doing what it needs to do. The work of our hands is successful. We're not fighting with one another. And so generally, the people are joyous. Shouldn't that be the way what we strive for? Think about that. What we set our hands to do, it's successful. We're not at one another's throats. And generally, we're joyous. We're glad to see one another. We're joyous among ourselves. Harmony. I would dare say and maybe you will disagree and help me. Teach us, please. That's a lot of what we're not seeing now. If you think about our country, and yes, this is our country because we built this mug for free, or at least our ancestors did. The politics is so fragmented that even the special groups are fighting within within themselves, about to cave in on themselves, right? This group not getting along with that group, families falling apart, right? Adults, married people, couples choosing divorce over trying to work it out. Parents and their adult children not speaking to one another. Adult children taking advantage of their indigent parents, and all kinds of crazy. Agreeing together is what Sister Tanita Howard said. Right? That's harmony, but we don't see a lot of that, and it's not going to happen without us doing so, creating these times, these spaces, these relationships on purpose, right? So what it will require of us, a degree of accountability, like we talked about earlier. You don't look like yourself. You're not acting like yourself. I hadn't seen you. You all right? A degree of accountability, right? That's not right. That's not going to work for you. Accountability, some discipline, because we can't just go one time and say, well, that didn't work, let's throw it away. No, it takes time, time, time to build relationships, to build relationship with God, to build relationship with one another. It takes time, and nothing is going to beat that, right? You can't buy enough gifts. You can't give enough offerings or make enough sacrifices to beat spending time with one another. So it's going to take discipline. It takes us the willingness to separate ourselves from the foolishness of this world. Can't live like that. Can't represent God like that. We can't build the relationships that is going to take to build the kingdom of God like that. And so again, how do we create harmony? Accountability with one another, discipline, and pulling back from the ways, the activities of the world. Because quite honestly, we can't rely on the world. We can't rely on this world that's been created again in a Eurocentric, with a Eurocentric worldview. We can't count on this world to produce harmony among us. In fact, this world strives off fragmentation, off division, off of pulling us apart, right? That's the way our politics are going in this day. That's the way that people make their money off of our pain, by causing fragmentation. I'm trying to think of another word, but that's the best I can do, right? This world seeks to produce excessive individualism. Everybody out for themselves. Stay out of my business. I can do this by myself. I don't need any help. Or you stay over there, I'm gonna stay over here. I might shake your hand or nod at you at church, but other than that, we so part, and I'll see you again next Sunday without even checking, or all of that. This excessive individualism. Pull yourself up by your own bootstraps. Even when it comes to this notion of salvation that thankfully Brother Stewart brought up earlier, have you noticed that in the indigenous way of seeing the world and God, what we can call the Old Testament, God spoke to the community. God brought up the community. But when we get to the New Testament, the lens, the kind of tense tension that is happening there is that we have moved from a Hebrew worldview to a Greek worldview, right? A Greco-Roman worldview, where it seems like it's all about the individual. I'm one to believe that God is building and lifting community. Yes, the old elders were right. Every tub got to stand on its own bottom. We have to be responsible for ourselves, but we also have to lift one another as we go. It does no good for one of us to rise and the rest of us to struggle. That, again, back to that individualism. And the Eurocentric worldview. We'll create a Michael Jordan. We'll create an Oprah Winfrey, or you name it, right? We'll create some of them, but the lifting of the masses, no, sir. We can't have that. We in fact, let's keep them divided. Let's keep them fragmented, right? I was in a discussion last night on a show talking about politics, and was just shocked, dismayed, when a brother beloved talked about our church will, but what about the rest of us? Can we all come up together? Can we all be in community? We might be under different names, but it's only one cross, right? There's only one Christ. And so we come up together, right? It's not about the individualism. Here's the next thing. It is we become divided by the myth of white supremacy. The myth, and I use that term on purpose, of white supremacy, because what happens is it centers whiteness, actually white, straight, male Christians. Hear that again. White, straight, male Christians, and everything else is the other, right? So we can't come together unless we center white, straight, male Christians, and that does not work. And that says that, black, brown, I don't mean to be ugly, what we call yellow, our LGBTQ, and they've added some letters, sisters and brothers, or even our sisters, right? All of that is in the periphery, and we cannot live. That does not create harmony. Oh, Sister Charlene Anthony on YouTube, demonic forces are trying hard to eliminate us as Christians. That's one reason that we have to love, encourage, pray, and motivate one another every chance we get. Yes, Brother Lewis adding to that on Facebook, reach back and get your brother and sister right on time. Right on time. So we promote harmony. We promote solidarity, not division, not this fragmented stuff, right? We promote communion, right? A communion of interest and like responsibilities, I dare say even mutual responsibilities for one another. That's why we're having this conversation. That's why we gather. That's what we're doing here, right? We come together just about every Wednesday, and we're building, right? This is community. Look at how we talk to one another, encourage one another, teach one another, inspire one another, right? So that we're not just talking, but we're thinking about how we're going to apply this stuff, how we're going to build with this, with what we're learning together and what we're teaching one another. I want to remind you of the passage of scripture that if you were there, you remember that our chairperson, Deacon Rogers, read for us. Ephesians chapter 4, verses 1 through 4. I won't read it for us. I want you to write that one down and meditate on these things for the next week. Use that for your devotion period for the next week. Please, sir, ma'am, come in agreement with us on that. Ephesians chapter 4, verses 1 through 4. For the next week, that's going to be our devotion scripture, which talks about how we are one. We are one. So let me push forward a little bit. This intentional idea of solidarity that won't just happen. We have to determine that we will do so. Aikwe Arma, I won't even try to spell that for you. African scholar that Greg Carr introduces to us, and his thoughts gives us the way that solidarity was created for us before we start taking on other people's ways, and the way that we can, build solidarity again. Three things. One is migration, right? So we got to move from a spiritual and mental state, from one spiritual and mental state to another, as we talked about, from believing the myth of white supremacy, or from believing in this idea of individualism, to believing in community, right? To believing in community, or really going back, this kind of Sankofa thing, going back to grabbing community, like we talked about, between the Hebrew worldview and the Greco-Roman worldview, right? Believing in solidarity, going back, migration. I'm moving from this to this in my mind, mentally, spiritually, in my relationship with God. I'm moving from one state to another. Then it requires adaptation. Migration first, adaptation, to adjust to one another. If we're going to build community, we have to know that everybody is not going to be the same or think the same. And so we're going to have to adapt to one another. Everybody is not going to have the same ways. We have to adapt to one another. Oh, that's how they do that. Oh, okay, then. Oh, I see. That's what this phrase means. Okay, then I got that. Right. That's the way that works. Migration, adaptation. Last one is improvisation. Migration, adaptation, improvisation. And that means to be really to be flexible, to meet one another where we are, right? Meet your sister, brother, where they are at that moment. So I'm moving from one state to another, from individualism to community. I'm moving from, I'm adapting to, just our different personalities, our different worldviews. I tell, I tell young couples when they are in their premarital counseling that what you are doing is you're taking everything you know about life and you are taking everything you know about life, and both of you are going to put it in one house and say, we're going to make it work. Well, it's the same thing with our relationships, our communities. We're bringing all of our stuff together, good, bad, and ugly, and saying we're going to make it work. That's the way that works, right? And so the improvisation is we got to be flexible. I'll never forget, I have a friend, one of my oldest friends, and we're always laughing and joking and teasing one another and so forth. And so I call him thinking I had one for him. I was going to joke with him and tease him about something or another. And at the moment I called, he was dealing with a very real, traumatic situation. And so I called with this, jovial kind of, and in hearing his voice, I immediately knew, okay, I got to dial back. I have to be here for him to listen and to try to help as much as I can. Sister Geraldine Gatlin, togetherness is the key. Yes, that's when you can understand the individual. Exactly. Togetherness is the key. Yes. Thank you. Thank you. So yeah, got to be flexible when we're dealing with one another, particularly when we're dealing with temperamental people, because sometimes you really don't know what you're going to get in dealing with this. I'm going to cut this short. Man, I've enjoyed this conversation. I hope that I put some things on your mind. Here's the last thing I want to tell you. Faith, hope, and love. Remember that? The famous love chapter, 1 Corinthians 13. Faith, hope, and love. These three. And the greatest of these is love. That's not just abstract ideas. That's values by which we have to live. And it all boils down to being loyal to one another. Perhaps I'll pick this up the next time we talk. It all boils down to being loyal to, being in allegiance to one another. We'll stop there. I mentioned holidays earlier. This is a great book if you want some ideas, gain knowledge on where things come from, how we do things, trying to get the glare off. There we go. It's called African American Holidays, but it really talks about a lot of different holidays. This one is written by James Anyike. James Anyike, African American Holidays. This is a great one to check out. Some ideas about how we can incorporate some cultural things in our own family gatherings. This is a good one. You should get this one on your bookshelf as well. Sister Yvonne Sutton, still teaching us. I love it. See, we have to be able to accept change. Did you hear that? We have to be able to accept change. Lord, if we could get that one right. Man, they tease me. I have been using the same deodorant and toothpaste until the people just stopped making it, right? Then I started making my own toothpaste to match what I thought what they would accept change. I love that one. Thank you, Sister Sutton. Brother Lewis, again, keep your mask on. Keep your mask on. Thank God for all of you. I love you. As always, I never, ever want you to forget that I love you and Dr. Angela loves you. Just a couple of announcements. Thank you to all of you who cast your vote in our recent elections in our country, in our parish, our city. Thank you so much for doing what you do, for being the example, right? Setting the model and the pattern. Now, listen, we have some runoffs coming up, and these runoffs for our local community are just as important as the first time you cast your ballot. And so we really have to encourage and inspire. Here we go. Encourage and inspire and incite one another to get out in these runoffs, because you know how the numbers drop, especially in December elections. So we really have to push it, right? We have a chance to make the school board, the local school board here, East Baton Rouge Parish, more equal. Pam Taylor Johnson is in a runoff. And that sister really needs our support. In fact, be on the lookout. Prophetic Voices is going to come together and get her some platform or some speaking opportunities. So we need to support that sister for school board. I understand that Don Johnson is in the runoff for appellate court. Imagine what that looks like, right? That when things don't go right at the local, at the state level, having someone from right here in the park who some of you went to school with, or your children went to school with, or your big brother, big sister went to school with at Capital or at Southern, right? Imagine having that person on the appellate court. And then Gail, is it Horn Ray or Ray Horn, is in runoff as well. And here's a sister with a background in and trained in civil rights law, right? And she cut her teeth with those who were on the front lines here in East Baton Rouge Parish years ago in those fights. And so the runoff election, I'm telling you, is maybe even more important than what we just did, and we appreciate it, but we really got to push our sisters and brothers to go out and cast that vote in this election. Don't forget that nominations for church council, first church council, talk about historic. Our first church council nominations are due this coming Sunday. You're going to hear from Sister Sandra Porter again before this week is out. Vacation Bible School is November 21st, 22nd for all ages. I think starting at age 5. Sister Janice, if you can help me there. Starting at age 5 through adults. They just want to know who are coming, who's going to be there, who plans to participate, so they can plan accordingly. That's November 21st through 22nd. 5 to 8 p.m. Please register. Let us know that you plan to be there. Our Sisterhood's annual tea is back on the docket, on the calendar after COVID. Well, COVID is still happening, but after these 3 years. And so Sisterhood Tea is November 19th at 11 a.m. The price is $10. Please bring our young ladies, right? Bring our seasoned saints, ladies. Let's all gather. Please, the donation, if you don't plan to attend, please make a donation. All of the monies will go to help our children who are in foster care at holiday time. Sister Evelyn Mitchell does amazing work with those children. And so the Sisterhood has taken up that cause. Lastly, please remember Brother Leonard Hawkins and his family. I see Sister Sutton is in here. Those funerals for his siblings are going to be this weekend. And so we want to remember Brother Hawkins and Sister Sutton, their family, Sister Sheila, Leonard's wife, in our prayers and concerns. Thank you again for all of you. Thank you for being patient with us tonight. You go in peace to love and serve the Lord. God bless you. Peace.